It is said that progress brings solution to a problem. In the late 19th century, there was no greater problem to rural eastern Kentucky than access. In 1881, with the creation of a railroad post in the town of Moorhead, the problem of access was solved. This small mountain town nestled in northeast Kentucky turned toward progress to help it grow. The railroad provided many opportunities to bring this growth. However, we must never forget that progress is precarious, and the solution of one problem brings us face to face with another. The town of Moorhead had taken the progress from the railroad, and within 3 short years, a bloody feud broke out on the streets and on the rails. "Remember what you said to do. You said you would kill him. Keep your word," said a dying Floyd Tolliver in reference to his assailant John Martin. And with that act of revenge, the Rowan County War had begun. The small town lived in fear, and this progress had brought with it a new form of terror. Gunshots in the street became the norm. The famed Martin Tolliver feud led to a grisly 20 deaths, 16 people wounded, all in its once sleepy mountain town. The town was known for lawlessness, thievery, and malice. The same railroad that brought opportunities to the town had become a place of ambush. Famed General Sam Hill called to Kentucky Governor Knott to dissolve Rowan County. Hill called for a return of the county's land back to the neighboring counties from which it was founded. The once unknown mountain town had gained national and international acclaim as a place of violence and savagery. We can't forget about the original concept of progress. Did access bring a solution to the town's problem? After all the violence and savagery, had the railroad really brought any progress to this town? The funny thing about progress is it doesn't happen overnight. After many people had given up hope for a better town, county, and region, the light of progress from access did finally shine through. The light was very dim in 1887 when the Reverend Frank Button and his mother Phoebe arrived to the town of Moorhead on that progressive train. The Buttons settled into the town of Moorhead very quietly in the fall of 1887. Using 2 small, poorly ventilated rooms for instruction, the Moorhead Normal School was opened. By the end of the first day, they had just 2 students. By the end of the second, they had 4. Little did the Buttons or those first students know that dim light was starting to shine brighter and would continue to get brighter year by year, overcoming obstacles along the way. This light shined into the town, county, and region, and gave the community the ability to see, think, educate, and persevere. This light allowed a small mountain feudist town to become a nationally known institution with over 64,000 alumni, top-rated academic programs, and voted as one of the top public universities in the South for over 10 years running. The light of progress did finally shine through, and with it provided change, opportunity, and triumph. The light of progress became the light to the mountains. The history of Morehead State University is one of politics, strong leadership, quality education serving its core demographic. The university did not come to its present status very easily. From feuds to floods, moonlight schools to accreditation, the story of Morehead State University is one of perseverance. From what was once a hopeless savage land that was almost given back to the surrounding counties and removed from the map, became this institution of higher learning. In the summer of 1887, Hiram and Logan Pigman surrounded and shot Craig Tolliver. 3 others were killed in a final shootout that 60 men participated in for over 2 hours. Townsfolk and merchants were beyond scared for their lives. After the smoke cleared, the town of Moorhead lay in ruins. The 3-year skirmish was so devastating to the local area that many residents had been afraid to even walk the streets. The feud reduced the community to near disorder. Realizing the denouncement of both the town and county, the citizens of Rowan County and Moorhead decided it was in their best interest to try to change their image. Of the many ideas proposed, one was to attempt to bring a normal school to Moorhead to help educate the region. William Temple Withers, ex-Confederate general and prominent lawyer, horse breeder and plantation owner, pledged his own money annually to send someone to Moorhead to start a school. The rough and rowdy town of Moorhead's reputation preceded it. Many people feared no one would take up the offer to start a school in the now infamous Kentucky town. Mrs. Phoebe E. Button and her son Frank Button answered the call. Phoebe and Frank had left their native Illinois in the 1870s to teach at the Kentucky Female Orphan Academy at Midway. On Frank Button's first day in Moorhead, he and his mother were reminded how difficult founding the school would be, as street gunfire was still the norm on Railroad Street.
The Buttons' mother and son came to Moorhead in the fall of 1887, just after the feud had ended in a dramatic shootout battle at the end of June in that same year. The missions arm of the Christian church decided that Moorhead would be an ideal place to establish a school that would bring Christian education to the Moorhead area. And the Buttons were sent here to begin that effort. He reported that on his first day in town, as he traveled about meeting some of the local folks and beginning to establish a presence here, that there were still occasionally stray shots fired in the area of the railroad tracks. And once or twice that day, he had to duck for cover behind a barrel or around the corner of a building.
The Moorhead Normal School was opened October 3, 1887, in the rented cabin where the Adrian Doran University Center stands today. The Moorhead Normal School got its first student that morning, an orphan by the name of Annie Page. That same afternoon, Ethel Bertie Ham also enrolled. By the end of November, the school had 22 students, and by February of 1888, that number jumped to 52. The rugged frontier town of Moorhead was a far cry from what the Buttons knew in Lexington and Midway. The Buttons, undeterred, braved the mountainous frontier in hopes of providing opportunities to eastern Kentucky. The founders then turned to another former Civil War officer and patron of the Christian church, the Honorable Thomas F. Hargis. Hargis provided 4 acres of land and a $500 donation to the construction of the first school building. In 1889, the 2-room building was completed, known as Hargis Hall, the first official structure used for education and church service for the Moorhead Normal School. The building was located in the area of present-day Allie Young Hall and the Camden Carroll Library. With things looking up and moving forward for the young school, a bit of bad news struck. Phoebe Button had taken ill, and in 1892, Frank Button resigned from his leadership position to take care of his ailing mother. Sadly, Phoebe later died that same year. With the Moorhead Normal School enrollment reaching over 200 students, the school needed a dormitory. Frank Button turned to his uncle in Illinois, Robert Hodson. Hodson donated a gift of $1,500 to the construction of the school's first dorm. The building, when completed, was known as Hodson Hall. With room and board in the 1890s at $2 per week, Tuition at the normal school was $5 for a 10-week period. In 1900, the school's management changed once again, as the Kentucky Christian Missionary Society transferred ownership over to the Christian Women's Board of Missions. The Kentucky Christian Missionary Society wanted to focus less on education and more on missionary work. The Christian Women's Board organized an advisory panel to promote a relationship between the school and the town of Moorhead. Serving on the board were two of the most influential people in Moorhead's history, Cora Wilson Stewart and Allie Young. Stewart, now the Rowan County School Superintendent, had a long history of fighting illiteracy in the eastern Kentucky region.
She actually attended Moorhead Normal for a while. When she began her career, she did so with just a public school education, which in today's terminology would be about an 8th grade education. Her main connection, though, I think, to Moorhead Normal is the fact that her family was connected to all of the people who were involved in Moorhead Normal at the time. In all of her papers, her diaries, she refers to Frank Button as Brother Button. She was very close to him. He was a mentor and a friend to her. And he encouraged her, I think, in her thinking and the development of her thinking, of using education as a tool, a vehicle for making the region better.
Under the Christian Women's Board, 2 new structures were completed. Withers Hall, a dormitory, and Burgess Hall, an on-campus library, auditorium, and classroom building, both completed by the turn of the century in 1900. Under the strong arm of the Christian Women's Board, the school had great success. Frank Button was quoted as the saying of the Christian Women's Board, "Under this new and competent management, the buildings have been repaired and enlarged. The number of teachers have been increased. The course of study have been strengthened, and a new epoch in its history has begun." Button, who had returned as principal in 1896, was proud to say, "There are no saloons in Rowan County," a far cry from the rough and rowdy days before the Moorhead Normal School was founded. The 1910-1911 school year saw Rowan County open its first public school. Public education becoming available, less of a need was being seen for the Moorhead Normal School. In 1911, Frank Button relocated to Versailles, Kentucky, to serve as a supervisor of rural schools under the sponsorship of the Rockefeller Foundation. Another blow to the Moorhead Normal School was the First World War. America's involvement in the Great War started in 1917, and the school saw a loss of students enrolled. 48 students from the school had either enlisted or were conscripted. The Christian Board of Women felt the school had served its need and purpose of improving social and educational conditions in Moorhead and eastern Kentucky. At this same time, talk began to pick Moorhead as the site for the new state-sponsored institution of higher education. As Dr. Flatt wrote, when everyone sang the last verse of the school's alma mater at the final commencement exercises in 1922, the words reflected not only the usual sadness of departing students, but the somber last farewell to an institution that was fast fading away. Normal, dear Normal, bless us now that we must part. Remember alma mater, keep us in thy heart. Governor Edwin P. Morrow and the state's legislature were not happy with the number of graduates coming from the state-funded teachers' schools at Eastern and Western teachers' colleges. The graduates were not meeting the demands of educators needed in a changing Kentucky. Governor Morrow proposed the appointment of a survey commission of trained educational experts to remedy Kentucky's educational problem. The commission felt the areas located in the Big Sandy Valley and Tennessee River region were the ideal locations that needed support. Judge Allie Young of Moorhead held important state connections. Local legends attribute to helping swing the town of Moorhead to the forefront of the proposed Eastern bid. The city of Paintsville, in turn, offered up the valuable property of John C.C. Mayo. The commission was now at an impasse of where to locate the school between the two offers. The commission adjourned until November 24th, 1922. W.S. Walden, Prestonsburg attorney and member of the commission, mysteriously altered his vote from Paintsville to Moorhead. This deciding vote swung the committee in Moorhead's favor, and the rest, as they say, is history. So why did Walden alter his vote? His reasoning was he traveled to Moorhead and saw the light. After seeing the hills and valleys, he felt God had spoken to him to choose Moorhead as the site. Walden vehemently denied any outside involvement in the changing of his vote. In the next day's Louisville Courier-Journal, an editorial believed that the voice that Walden heard was none other than the Judge Allie Young of Moorhead. Despite the controversies, a new school moved forward with Frank Button as the first president. Button had served 12 years as the rural school supervisor in the state of Kentucky. Button also served as a very respected minister in Moorhead and had many champions of his leadership and ministry style in the Moorhead region. Allie Young and Frank Button would have a contentious relationship moving forward. But in the West, Murray State was born, and in the East, Morehead State was born from the ashes of the Moorhead Normal School.
I compare it basically to two alpha males stalking each other. Allie Young was a person who did not feel he had to hold high political office himself in order to be a person of influence and consequence in state government. The highest office he ever held was that of state senator. There was talk many times of his running for governor. He probably felt, with the controversy attached to his family going back to the feud days, that that might not be the best course for him to follow. So he fulfilled the role of a kingmaker, a deal broker, someone who worked very effectively behind the scenes. At that time, a governor was in office for only one term and could not succeed himself. Allie Young felt that as an influential state senator influencing public policy from behind the curtain, if you will, he could be a force to be reckoned with for much longer than the typical four-year governor's term. Once the school was established and Frank Button was brought back to be its first president, Allie Young remained on the Board of Regents for the rest of his life.
The opening of the school on September 23, 1923 was a day that saw a carnival-like atmosphere in Moorhead. Early morning crowds arrived via train, car, wagon, horse, and foot. Aside from feeding such a large group of people that day, the biggest problem was preventing horses from being hitched on campus. The role of Allie Young in the first years of the state school is very important to not overlook. Allie Young, a figure that is somewhat controversial in the way that the school came to Moorhead, made sure the school would succeed. Allie Young, at the first Board of Regents meeting in April of 1924, provided an interest-free loan of $10,000 to run the school for the year. Allie Young then used his political connections in Frankfort to help Moorhead solve its problems with buildings on campus. As a state senator, Allie Young secured $1.2 million during 4 legislative sessions from 1924 to 1930.
Friend of Judge Allie Young, and Judge Allie Young, of course, was more responsible for the Moorhead School than anybody else on earth, and presided over the Senate, and I say Judge Allie Young was the floor leader. And his main concern in life was, almost without exception, was Moorhead College. I felt like, and so did more people than I know, had felt that he hand carried it there, and without his support, it wouldn't be there. Everybody wanted, Paintsville wanted it, and Ashland wanted it, and oh yeah, you never could do anything like that. And I say, except for Judge Allie Young, I'm certain it wouldn't have been located, because he got a lot of criticism from people around the state who accused him of just deliberately, I say, hand carrying it up there, and he did.
At the same Board of Regents meeting, it was determined that Moorhead would seek the services of the famed Olmsted Brothers firm of Boston to survey and draw up architecture plans for the new campus. The Olmsted Brothers firm completed numerous high-profile projects. With the services of the Olmsted Brothers, Moorhead began to build a series of Tudor Gothic buildings to replace the aging infrastructure of the old Moorhead Normal School. With the first building completed in 1926, construction continued into 1928. From the Olmsted prints, the Administration Building, Allie Young Hall, Thompson Hall, and Fields Hall were all completed with a cost of less than $1 million. The first faculty was hired for the new Morehead State Normal School, and with a student body of 3 and 70 on the waiting list, the school opened for the first time as a state-funded institution of higher education. 1926 saw the General Assembly of the Commonwealth of Kentucky grant Morehead State the ability to confer the first 4-year degrees. Moorhead once again saw a name change, going from the Morehead State Normal School to the Morehead State Normal School and Teachers College. Moorhead students produced the first school newspaper in 1927. The school paper was known as the Moorhead Light. 2 years later, in 1929, the school chose the name Trailblazer as the title of the publication, which remains active to this day. Allie Young's term was coming to an end in 1927, and the school, recognizing his great contributions, rallied the campus and town to help re-elect Young to another term in the state senate. Dr. Button oversaw the campus and helped guide it in its early years. Dr. Button, however, struggled with now being both administrator and liaison to the Kentucky politicians. Button famously had a rocky relationship with Allie Young. Button, who never drove a car, would have others drive him to Frankfort to visit and confer with Allie Young over school-related matters. One of the major issues in the late 1920s for Moorhead was the school's lack of accreditation. Button started the proper channels to get the school accredited. In 1929, Button requested help from the University of Kentucky in surveying the school for accreditation purposes. The Board of Regents appointed Frank McVeigh, University of Kentucky president, along with Charles Judd of George Allen University, to conduct the report. Sadly, without realization, Button would not keep his position after the reports were finished. The McVeigh report over accreditation shook the foundations of the school. After widespread changes in staff and faculty, the board cited another lacking area of the institution was its lacking of a working college library. Until 1929, the library was located in the old Burgess Hall building from the original Moorhead Normal School. The board in 1929 asked for Button's resignation, the removal of 10 faculty members, and granted 6 leaves of absence to Moorhead faculty members who did not ask for it. Regent Allie Young made the motion for Button's resignation. Dr. Button knew nothing of his dismissal or the faculty's until after the Regents' meeting. Button, upon learning the news, felt Allie Young had forced him out. Allie Young and Frank Button's relationship had become very strained at this point.
I think Frank Button was a very competent educator and administrator. That occurred as he was getting older. When he came back to Moorhead as the first president of Moorhead State Normal School and Teachers College, as it was known back then, he was entering his 60s. And in the 1920s, that meant that a person was looking pretty much in the last chapters of his life. He was an able man. I think perhaps there were some who considered that he wasn't as aggressive as he might have been in helping the new institution get its legs under it. But I think overall he did well.
Button's 27-year tenure at the school had come to an end. Moorhead in 1929 was a very different place than the one he and his mother came to in 1887. Button, whom in 1929 introduced the new school president, John Howard Payne, quietly stepped aside from the school. Button remained active in the local community and church. Dr. Flatt wrote of Button, He started the transition from a successful church-related normal school to a state institution of higher learning. Holding the record for longevity among the school's leaders, he built up a reservoir of goodwill and loyal following among the institution's constituencies that future leaders would need when they endeavored to bring about necessary change. Frank Button would pass away in 1933 at St. Joseph's Hospital in Lexington after complications from prostate surgery. He led Morehead State for over 27 years, truly blessing the school, region, and state with the light to the mountains. Brother Button is buried in Lee Cemetery, on campus in the shadow of the great school he helped to build. The Moorhead students of today arrive with their own cars and can come and go at their own conveniences. This was not the case for the students in the 1920s and 30s. The roads surrounding the campus and town were so bad that once late fall and winter set in, students were essentially stuck. Most students remained on campus until spring or the end of the semester to travel back home. Rowan County's first paved road came in 1923. Moorhead's Main Street was a particularly difficult road to navigate in the winter. Before the 1920s, the major sport for Moorhead was baseball. As the 1930s arrived, baseball was the first organized sport of the school. George Downing served not only coach of baseball, but of every organized sport. In 1926, Moorhead businessman J.M. Clayton sponsored a contest to select the sport's nickname for the school. The name chosen was Bald Eagles, then shortened to Eagles. Football, baseball, boxing, and 1929 basketball were all sports added to the school, all coached by George Downing. Moorhead in 1928 was accepted into the West Virginia Athletic Conference. Female sports at Moorhead began in 1924 with basketball. 1928 saw Moorhead go 7-2 and hold the best record for football in the state. The 7-2 mark is still third best all time. George Downing was removed as coach in 1936 and replaced with Ellis T. Johnson, who coached both basketball and football. The players of 1936 still regard their game against Eastern as the most celebrated campaign in MSU football history. 1930 saw the school gain its third name in 8 years. The school officially became the Morehead State Teachers College, dropping the name Normal and focusing on higher education and teacher training. President Payne had to pick up where Button left off with trying to gain the school's accreditation. Payne was the first president to live in the newly completed president's home on campus. Payne was the first president to speak and be inaugurated in the newly constructed auditorium. In 1930, in what was viewed to be something in the 1920s that would take mountains to move, Morehead State gained accreditation. Morehead State Teachers College was accepted into the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools in December of 1930. Presidents Button and Payne led the greatest era to that point in buildings on campus. The building of the campus came at the time when materials and labor were cheap and money was scarce. From 1926 to 1935, the campus sprang up with buildings. The buildings include the President's Home, Auditorium Gymnasium, Johnson Camden Library, Breckenridge Training School, and Jane Memorial Stadium. In constructing the library in 1929, Burgess Hall was demolished. Tearing down the old original normal school structure was sad for many. After leveling of the grounds by mule team, the structure was completed in 1930. Symphonauditorium was a building of wonder for the age. Coined as the greatest swimming pool in the South, construction was finished in 1934. The pool, other than specialty tile work, was completed all with local labor to help the lack of jobs in the local area. No power tools were used in the construction, and all mule-powered teams did all the land clearing. The architectural firm Johnson & Johnson from Louisville was commissioned for its construction. Simpson Auditorium had revolutionary skylights for the time, which helped eliminate the issue of humidity in an indoor pool. February 18th, 1935. The campus, town, and state was shocked at the news. Judge Allie Young had died from a prolonged illness in Louisville at the age of 69. Allie Young, a pivotal force in politics, business, and law, death shocked everyone. Love him or hate him, Allie Young was the pivotal force that brought the state school to Moorhead that is now Morehead State University. The February 19th edition of the Rowan County News only had one thing on the entire front page. Judge Allie W. Young died Monday, February 18th, 1935. Allie Young's service was held in Button Auditorium, the Honorable Judge Earl Simpth eulogizing Allie Young and praising his efforts in getting the school in Moorhead.
Allie Young's death was a true tragedy. He was not quite 70 years old. He had heart and kidney problems, and when he developed a very serious ear infection in 1935, in the absence of the good medications that we have now, his death resulted from complications from mastoiditis.
(1934) saw Payne lingering in his presidency at Moorhead State. Payne developed serious health issues and by 1935 developed serious dependencies on medication. In the summer of 1935, Dean Warren Vaughn, at the recommendation of the Board of Regents, dismissed Payne as president. A few weeks later, Payne was tried and convicted by a Rowan County grand jury of being insane and placed into the Eastern State Hospital. With a new president search on, the board turned to another educator, Harvey Babb. Babb had served as public school superintendent and was chosen as a new president of Moorhead State Teachers College. The Babb years at Moorhead State saw major construction. Local residents were pleased when they drove through campus and observed the completion of the Science Hall in 1937 and East Men's Hall the following year. The road was paved back in 1939 for Breckenridge Training School to US 60, creating a better driving infrastructure to the campus and school. Babb was president in an era where money was tight. Babb, who had played football at the University of Kentucky, wanted to gain some positive publicity for the school in an era with very little. Babb wanted to develop the Moorhead State football team into a winner and help bring Moorhead some positive notoriety moving into the 1940s. Babb, to many faculty's chagrin, cut the funding to other school activities to make a larger budget for the football program. Babb was not a favorite of the faculty moving forward and was investigated by a legislative committee and the state attorney general for illegal activities as college president. The students, after learning of the dismissal of popular faculty, staged a protest, marching down to the president's home. The students took their frustrations to Frankfort and met with Governor Chandler. With all the turmoil, Moorhead had created even more bad press in the state. Babb's 5 tumultuous years came to an end in 1940. In May of 1940, the Board of Regents elected Dean Warren H. Vaughn to the presidency. Vaughn was the first president to hold the dubious distinction of holding a doctorate degree. Vaughn's administration was in a time of crisis because of the outbreak of World War II. The enrollment declined from 1,300 students in 1939 to 378 5 years later. The war brought many changes to the world America and the college landscape. The small mountain school of Moorhead was faced with such low numbers, a fear was created about how the school was going to keep operating throughout the wartime. President Vaughn, along with Dean Warren Lappin, arranged a $2 million contract with the Navy to train sailors in electrical techniques. This making Moorhead State the first Kentucky college and one of the first in the nation to be selected for the Navy College Training Program. Moorhead State, a school in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains, becoming a training school for the Navy? As incredible as it sounds, yes it did. In June of 1942, Morehead State, along with the United States Navy, opened its training program. The school would continue for all normal Moorhead students, with changes being made to accommodate all the sailors on campus. The sailors gained the nickname of Blue Jackets, and were normally referred to this when in or around campus.
They went to Washington, D.C. at the beginning of World War II and talked with some people up there, and then they came back and went up to a college that had been taken over by the government, and they were training soldiers there and so forth. So they decided they could put in a school. So they got the electrical equipment to train electricians here, and so we had the Moorhead Navy was in Moorhead for about 3 years, and when they left here, they were fully prepared to go on board any ship or submarine in the Navy and be a working electrician when it went on. And it was quite a sight to see 500 sailors in full dress uniforms marching up and down Main Street and the Boulevard. It was just something you just seemed like it was out of place.
The Navy Training School taught more than 3,000 second-class seamen, as 600 sailors were on campus at a time. The townsfolk of Moorhead had grown accustomed to the sailors in and around town. The sailors marched every morning from campus and down to Main Street and back. The school suffered academically during the Blue Jacket years. By the end of the war in 1945, the campus had to adjust to the influx of returning soldiers, students, and faculty. With Congress passing the GI Bill of Rights, returning military personnel were eager to get an education. Nearly one half of all Moorhead students were veterans under the GI Bill. With President Vaughn's contract about to expire in 1946, Kentucky Governor Willis did not like the fact that the presidents at Eastern, Western, Murray, and Moorhead were all Democrats. The governor seized on an opportunity and dismissed Vaughn after his contract ended. Morehead State had now ousted 3 presidents in 20 years. The Board of Regents appointed Dean Warren Lappin as acting president until a new president could be hired. The board begins once again to search for a president to lead Morehead State. The board turned to William Jesse Baird. Baird, a Kentucky native, had served both as faculty and administrator at Berea College. William Jesse Baird was in ill health as he took the job as president. Baird promised to build a strong educational institution at Morehead State and move forward, even after the firing of President Vaughn. The firing of former President Vaughn led to serious repercussions for Morehead State. Vaughn had requested both the Southern Association and American Association of Teachers Colleges to determine whether his dismissal had been for real cause or political. The Southern Association began an investigation based on Morehead State's reputation for politics. The campus was in a panic, and students wondered if their degrees had any merit after graduation. The Southern Association ruled that the law must be changed for a governor to appoint board members to the Board of Regents before a new study could be done. The Southern Association began its long investigation and declared in December of 1948 Morehead State would be granted reaccreditation. Dr. Baird sent a telegram from the association's conference in Memphis, and shortly after, the town's students and faculty were on campus celebrating. "1948 saw a new Moorhead emerge. With the Southern Association granting reaccreditation and the school gaining its 4th name, now the Morehead State College, the future looked bright for all parties involved. Dr. Baird's failing health was beginning to take a toll on his day-to-day operations of running the campus. And in September of 1950, Baird became ill with a heart condition. The board granted Dr. Baird an 8-month leave of absence to convalesce from his heart issues. Dean Warren Lappin was appointed interim president for the second time. Sadly, on February 19, 1951, the sainted Dr. Baird passed away at a Cincinnati hospital. Dr. Baird was 60 years old. If it were not for the tireless efforts of Dr. Baird with regaining the school's accreditation, the university would not be what it is today. Dr. Baird is the only Morehead State president to have died in office. The Board of Regents began in April of 1951 discussing the selection of Dr. Baird's successor. After a long deliberation to find the right candidate, the board picked Charles R. Spain as Morehead State College's 6th president. Spain was the youngest president ever at 38, and his wife and 2 kids accompanied him to live in the on-campus president's home. In the summer of 1953, President Spain listened to the many voices and named the college auditorium after the school's founder, the first president, Frank Button. President Spain decided he would leave in 1954, informing the Board of Regents of his decision to leave at the end of the 1954 academic year. Spain was the shortest span president in the school's history. In 1952, the college held a contest to write the school's new alma mater and theme. The old normal school alma mater was long past its prime, and it was time to have a new theme song composed. Elwood Cozy won the songwriting contest, and Betty Jo Witt composed the music to accompany his lyrics. The winning entry was, "Far above the rolling campus, resting in the dale, stands our dear old alma mater, her name will always hail. Shout in chorus, lift our voices, blue and gold, praise thee, winning through to fame and glory, dear old MSC."